The Army values, the Warrior ethos, coaching, and therapy. This is Warrior Leadership. This is Warrior Leadership. This is JJ Hardy, the coach, and I'm here with DB, the therapist, and we are going to continue on with the next episode in our series on toxic leadership. We're going to talk about mental health and toxic leadership. How you doing today, DB?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Man, you know what? It's a beautiful day. I have to apologize to the audience because we didn't get out there last week and do Warrior Leadership. We were having technical issues, and though that's not an excuse, it's something. Life happens, but we're back. We're gonna do this episode that we were gonna air last week, and I'm excited about it.
That's right. Me too, man. You know, toxic leadership and mental health, right? That's
Yes.
we started last time and we got into it, and when you think about toxic leadership and mental health, I mean, there's a direct, like, positive correlation between the two. When you're in a toxic leadership environment, we talk about this. I try to reference this a lot, is that toxic leadership with a boss or with a coworker or whomever is probably going to mirror just toxic relationships that people are in. And so there's this, like, it's overlap. And so the brain doesn't know that the environment at work is different from the environment at home. And so a lot of that, what we call countertransference and transference, can happen between an employee and their boss. And so when you think about toxic leadership and mental health, it really is incumbent upon the individual and the leaders to just be aware of that, because we know what the negative effects are when people repress emotions and feelings like that. That just compounds the mental health issues. It affects productivity. It affects just overall the profit, right? So we talk about, in business, we talk about profit. Well, people are the ones who drive profit. And when you're in a toxic leadership culture and it's affecting their mental health, there's going to be this just direct effect on everything else in the environment.
You're right. And I say this all the time as well. A business is nothing more than a group of people that come together to do a job. And so when it comes to people, you talk about this quite often. If they have icebergs from their youth or from past jobs, those icebergs are the underlying things that they almost hold as a value or a principle of their own, that those things are a direct result of experiences that they've had before. When those things are deep, when they go into an environment and it's toxic again, or if they stay in an environment and it continues to be toxic every day, it weighs on a person. And, they feel trapped. And over time, that feeling of being trapped will turn into depression, and you almost get addicted to those feelings, and it's very, very unhealthy. But it also, if those people stay at one job for a long time and they feel like they're trapped there, now they get promoted, how is that going to affect a larger group of people when that person is now in a supervisory or management position? And we're told as managers, you have to have this emotional intelligence, right? So how are you going to develop a good set of emotional intelligence when you have grown up in a toxic environment, probably have horrible habits, and now you're just driving productivity every day? You're not going to be able to do it because your mind can't separate the negative from the positive. It just knows it's got to get stuff done.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that leads to it. What I'm hearing is, like, it's this place of, like, disequilibrium where we no longer have balance. And when we talk about just overall wellness, we spend 8 hours of our day or more sometimes at work. And really, when it's a toxic environment, we're going to be spending more than 8 to 12 hours a day at work because we're going to take it home with us. No matter how much we say, oh, leave work at work and home at home, I wonder, I think the telltale signs of a toxic culture, toxic leadership is how much are you at home while you're with your family thinking about preparing for that next day with that encounter with that boss or with that encounter with that person and figuring out ways to just kind of stay psychologically safe, right? Because that's our brain's job. Our brain is naturally going to try to protect us from harm. And so when that adrenaline and cortisol is constantly pumping through the body, ready for a fight, and really not having it, it just becomes this like negative feedback loop where you just keep going through the cycle, man, of fight, flight, freeze. And it over time, that's what drives people. That's what drives the increased likelihood of an anxiety disorder or depression. That's what those things push, that those hormones push us out of the resiliency zone, especially when they're not needed for our actual survival, right? So that's not the boss, creating a toxic environment is not necessarily unsafe to us, but our body is perceiving it as unsafe. And so here it is, we're getting up for this fight that's not happening, and then we constantly do that, and that's what ends up causing those mental health conditions to develop. One of the things that really I focus on in my practice is helping people through, and we've talked about this before, sometimes it's just not a good fit, the environment that you're in, and you're only there for a season. But the challenge, and this is where I think relationship dynamics come in at, is like, how do you leave? How do you properly leave an organization that just not, the culture is toxic and it's not going to change? Because as a social worker, I look at people from a person and environment perspective. So if the environment is toxic and there's no change in the environment from a top down approach, then in order for the human being or the organism to thrive and to be the best version of themselves, they have to change the environment that they're in. And before you change the external environment, you have to do the work to change the internal environment, right? Mm-hmm. There you go. The battlefield of the mind. Joyce Myers had a book about battlefield of the mind. I read that. You have to change your perception and the way you see things. That changes the way you feel, and then that helps you, that pushes you in the resiliency zone. And I think where there's an opportunity in this, and people might not see it like this, but you can really grow in a toxic environment when you develop those healthy coping skills and those tools to be able to really push past the toxic nature of the work, of the environment that you're in.
That's where I think cognitive behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral coaching can really, really help somebody, because the biggest struggle that a lot of people in a toxic environment have is the ability to see the positive part in a negative situation. And when you constantly are self-deprecating, or you don't see a way to make things better, but that's where your mind lies, is trying to make things better, then you feel like you're failing all the time. People and part of reframing a situation like that could be something so simple as, yeah, I didn't increase my numbers this month, but we had no injuries. And just finding the small wins out of a potentially damaging situation. And you know what? It can actually help you, especially if you're the supervisor, right? It can actually help you create better relationships with your boss and your peers, because if they see that you are figuring out how to find the positive and the negative, then you're teaching them how to do it too. But it also lets them know that, hey, we didn't completely fail.
Right.
And when your boss comes up to you and said, your numbers suck, sir, I want to let you know that we did not have any injuries this month. Well, then he's going to say, huh, you're right. But we normally do, don't we? Well, sure we are. Well, guess what? You just did some cognitive behavioral coaching to your own doggone boss. And but it's simple, right?
Yes.
But that skill, you might be able to do it once or twice and then you forget. And a lot of people, they're taught these things. But if you don't practice it on a regular basis, then your mind has an automatic tendency to move towards the positive rather than the negative.
Right. Right. You mean move towards the negative and not the positive, right?
Yeah, I got my mix all talked. Sorry about that.
No. We just reframed it together. No. We have that negative bent, right? We go right to the negative. And I think, Coach, this is where the bridge between coaching and therapy really is powerful, right? And both of us being, experts in CBT. I mean, you CBT for coaching and me CBT in therapy. Just imagine a client who comes in and they're working with me through some issues that are going on in work, a toxic leadership environment. And then we discover that this boss is actually, they have an enmeshed relationship. And now this boss is seen as like a mother figure. They're not just their boss anymore. And really, that happens. And so what happens when we go in there, we go deep into the unconscious part of their mind and we reframe earlier situations that they had with mom. And then that dealing with the root issue then allows them to say, you know what, I can now separate this boss from, the relationship I have with my mom. And when I go to work, I'm not triggered by this person because I expect these certain things because I already have these reframing thoughts that I've worked on my 5-column worksheet. Once that person gets to a place where they master that 5-column worksheet and deal with like defective thoughts and attachment issues and all that other stuff that goes on in our life that we need therapy for, at that point, they get referred over to you, coach, and then they do some cognitive behavioral therapy and coaching and help them move forward. Either they're moving up in the organization or they're moving out of the organization. Well, they practice for 3 to 6 months with me using literally the same tool, but with you, they're using it in a different way because they're using it to move forward in their career and in their life, but they've already practiced the tool. And I think that's where, when we talk about bridging coaching and therapy, that's where, it gets exciting, man, to think about, having that client and coming in and being able to move them from, you were an employee in an organization. Now you were dealing with some issues. We were able to help you reveal some deep-rooted issues that were going on with you. You're able to gain some new thoughts, new perspective about that. Now let's move you on to bigger and better things in your life, because so many people, I think, in my experience in therapy, they get to a point where I give them these tools and then they get stuck and say, well, what's next? Well, that's where you need a coach, because you need to go to the next. You need to figure out, you need to make a game plan and figure out what your next steps are. Because if you stay in that same environment, this is the unfortunate part. Even with the tools, it's possible for you to regress because the environment is so negative and toxic. That's the power that's literally the power of a toxic, negative environment. What I don't want to do as a therapist is I don't want to get into like this positive psychology thing where I say, you know what, you have to think positive forever in a toxic environment. No, sometimes, and I'm gonna use an analogy from the military. Sometimes you got to get out the kill zone. You got to get out of that area. Like some areas are just not the best environment for you. But how do we give you the tools to operate within that environment for a given period of time until you can move forward? Because I think too often, man, how many times have you seen people in a toxic environment and they left prematurely and then only to go back into another environment that's the same way? And that means that they didn't change something up here. My mom used to tell me this all the time. She used to say, son, everywhere you go, there you are.
Now, there's another part to that. I'm glad you brought that up, because what if you are the person who is creating that
Woo!
toxic environment because you have all of these underlying issues?
Oh my.
And I want the viewers or the people listening, depending on what platform you're on, I want you to consider that you are the one who is the problem here. And now, problem is a naughty word, right? But at the end of the day, if you are struggling, and no matter what environment you move into, you are struggling in that environment, and people are not happy with you, or you're not happy with everyone else, if everyone else is always the problem, the chances are you're probably the problem. And so these cognitive behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral coaching techniques, they provide that continuity of care. So if you decide, and by the way, this is really hard. There's still a negative stigma for this. If you decide you want to go over and receive some therapy because you can't seem to find the right environment for yourself, and you reveal that it's your own mindset that's keeping you from having a good environment, doesn't matter where you are, and then you kind of identify those things, you start reframing things, but now you need to apply those things and start improving your work environment. Well, that's when the cognitive behavioral coaching comes in. It's that continuity of care, because you already learned the tools. Now you need to take those tools and turn them into a different type of methodology. And instead of improving your mindset, now you have the tools to improve your mindset. You're going to take those same tools to improve your environment and start moving forward in a positive direction. And if you can understand that that's the path that you need to take, your life and the life of everybody around you, especially at work, is going to be a lot better. And this, just like DB said, it extends from the work environment to the home environment, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. And if you're unhappy there, you're probably unhappy at home as well. And if you're married with kids, then the chances are your spouse and your kids are being affected by this. So it does not hurt you to go get a little bit of help. And a lot of people say it's too expensive, or, that's not covered by insurance, or whatever the case may be. But, you're willing to go invest money in Starbucks or Taco Bell or whatever the case every day, but you're not willing to go invest in the one thing that's most important, and that is yourself. And when you reframe that, then that money that you would spend on a few therapy coaching or therapy sessions every month for a few months, before you take that opportunity and transition from therapy to coaching, and then actually improve things, that's a lifelong investment right there. And if you only have to do that for a year, and then you're done because you have all the tools to move forward with, what would that look like for a person? I went on a ramble. I apologize for that, but I just absolutely feel like that is the most valuable investment. And so if you're creating that toxic environment, it doesn't have to be DB. It doesn't have to be me if you already know that you're the toxic person and you've been through some therapy before. But you need to talk to somebody that can help you get from A to Z. Or if you're already at F and you want to finish the rest of the way to Z, then don't quit when you're halfway to the finish line. Get back on that horse and keep on riding until you get there.
And about the mental health aspect, I think there's another aspect of that person that's toxic and not recognizing they're toxic. So there's a lot of research out there now about the brain body connection. And so a lot of times people are not realizing that, you could try to hide your mental health issues, but from what we're learning is that those mental health issues will manifest in your healthcare. So high blood pressure, diabetes, even some forms of cancer, right? The liver, the spleen, the back of the neck trauma and mental health, like even issues like emotions like envy, right? It's stored in places of the body. And like I'm so fascinated by just the understanding of that brain body connection to where, you know, if you think so, you could be having a health issue ongoing and it pops up out of nowhere. And the underlying issue that the medical professionals don't see is your untreated mental health issues, or your untreated toxic stress, or or we're talking about, you know, toxic leadership and mental health. Well, we've also just kind of focused in on the individual that could be toxic. Like that's not going to show up on the doctor's in the doctor's assessment. So when you go meet with an MD and you have a medical condition, you know, social determinants of health like work and things that are happening there that are affecting your mental health that also affects your body, most MDs are not necessarily skilled in lifestyle medicine to understand the connection between that. And so you could have a chronic, an acute issue going on that's turning into a chronic condition because all they're doing is treating you with medicine. And the underlying issue is being ignored because, and that's where that care coordination comes in at, coach. It's so important to really understand what's happening in people's life in every domain of their life. And but you as the individual, this, you know, I like to empower myself and empower people. Well, if you know that you're beefing with somebody at work, you know, I do this activity called trust circles. And I think this is it's a great tool that even right now somebody can use. And if you draw 3 circles on a page and you put people in your inner circle, right? Those are the people who are closest to you, and you have a great working relationship with them, really no drama, no stress between you and those people. The next level are people that, you know, you kind of see them in passing. You're not necessarily beefing with them or nothing really going on. They're just not in your inner circle. Well, this third circle, everyone in that third circle used to be in the inner circle. And that's where whenever I have someone do that assignment, the people that are in that outer circle, if they're there, we need to assess each relationship individually and figure out, do I hold any resentment or any type of feelings or emotion towards that person? Because if I do, then that's affecting my mental health. We can think like, oh, I forgot. What do they say? Forgive and don't forget. Well, okay, that saying sounds good, but the
You
body
don't want
takes
to
the
forget.
floor.
You don't
Right.
want to forget.
Right.
Because you got, in a way, you got to expect people to be who they are. So, you know, especially if you have to continuously deal with these people, DB, and I didn't mean to interrupt you if I did,
No, you good.
but you gotta keep in mind that forgetting what happened, even though you may have forgiven, right, for you, not necessarily always for that person, forgiving for you to get the toxic sludge out of your system. When you forgive, and then you forget, well, then in a way that's almost like inviting that same toxic relationship to come back to you. And you know, keeping people at a distance who have wronged you once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, that's smart. And the only reason you keep somebody at a distance is because you know that they're going to be like that again. You got to expect people to be who they are. So you got to protect yourself.
No, and coach, keeping them at a distance is healthy. What I'm honing in on is the emotional part of it, like the
Okay.
emotion, the negative emotion that's tied to that relationship. Keep them in that third rung, and keep them in that third rung. That's where they belong. They earned that. They earned their position.
Or
But
farther away.
right, or further away. But the emotional part of it, like if we keep them, if we have all that resentment, that hurt, that hatred, whatever that emotion is that comes with that relationship, then it's affecting us. So keep them there physically. They earned it, and they don't get to be in that inner circle. But we shouldn't. But they're renting space in our minds, when we allow the emotion of the experience to stay there. And you know, I have a lot of so I can't wait to tell my toxic leadership story about work, because I swear I've had several situations with bosses, and I'm not gonna tip my hat on this one, but there have been several bosses that I've had that for sure they got put in that third rung in the ladder, but they were in the third rung, but they were still on my mind. And I like, they would just keep coming up over and over and over again in different ways. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not even working with this boss no more. I'm still thinking about this person. Other people are reminding me of them when they do something, and it's like, oh, well, if that person continues to manifest in the next boss or in the next experience, that means it's something that's toxic inside of me. It has,
So
you know what I'm saying?
I have a
It's something I
question
got
for
to deal
you.
with.
I have a question for you on that. So there's physical and there's emotional. And so I know we're talking about emotional, but if that person continues to circle around in your mind, does that mean they're not really in that third circle? That technically they're still in that first circle?
No, they're in the third circle because they don't have close proximity to me anymore.
Okay.
Physically, I've pushed them. Physically, they're not in it, and that's the good question. That's the point that I'm making, is that so emotionally and spiritually they're in that inner circle, but they're not physically there no more, and it's because I'm allowing them to be there. I'm allowing them to infect my inner circle by me continuing to hold on to those feelings and harbor those feelings. And what happens, and in my own experience, this is my own experience, and I've watched this play out with other people, then you forget the people who are in your inner circle. You're so focused on the toxicity of those previous relationships, you're missing the point that, like, wow, you know, my buddy David just reached out to me and made sure he checked on me. Like, but in our minds, we're so focused on that negative relationship that we're missing all of the input that we're getting from the people in that inner circle. It's like and then I think that's where so many people get on an island unto themselves, and they push their circle so far out. There's people in that inner circle with them, but they push everybody out, where it's like, in reality, you have people in your inner circle, but you push them so far away from you. So now you're on that island. And I think the way we deal with that is we got to deal with that toxic, all that toxic stuff that's built up in us from the resentment, all that stuff, because although we say we forgive people, man, we keep track of when people hurt us, man, and our body keeps track. More importantly, that's what I want to say there. It's like, and I'll stop beating a dead horse, but our body takes the score, and we have to talk to our body. We have to talk to it. We have to, in our body, meaning our brain and then our heart, right? It can all, and all of our other organs, it's connected. And so if we don't reframe it and talk to it and tell it that, you know what, yes, that happened to you, but these are the positives and these are the things that we learned from it. Now the body trusts us, and now it knows that, okay, he's going to keep me safe. But if not, it's going to continue to try to protect itself. It just naturally does that. It naturally is trying to protect itself from harm. So you have to tell your body that you're safe in order to build new relationships.
So this is interesting because I think we all deal with this. So does that mean you have not truly forgiven? And if not, then what is that? We're almost out of time. But what does that look like to truly forgive?
Forgiveness is a long, lifelong process. And you know, you, even when you forgive and you work through the narrative, and you rewrite the narrative. And that's one of the exercises that I do with people, is that, especially when it's like a very an intimate relationship, and there's a lot of hurt in that relationship, we need to go back and frame by frame the parts of it that were most hurtful. We need to review those experiences, and we need to rewrite what we said about ourselves in those experiences and that person, because that's going to change the emotion, right? And changing that emotion and reframing that is what's going to push us back into that resiliency zone. But most importantly, is going to allow us to connect with other people again, but first connect with ourselves, because we start to disassociate from ourselves when all this stuff is going on.
You're right about that. Yep. Yeah, familiar with that, actually. Probably more than I should be. Aren't we all? But
yes, all of us are, man. All of us are.
But that's why it's important to address with it. You should always look internal, especially when it comes to toxic leadership. And so it's different when you're an execution level employee, or maybe you're a supervisor or manager, or in some sort of a senior leadership position in your organization. When you start seeing a bunch of bad things happen, whether it's toxic or not, you need to address that within yourself and make sure from a servant leadership standpoint that there's nothing you can do to better serve your people, or maybe there's something that you need to deal with yourself. And once it's that same thing that we've talked about before, and I know we were going a little bit long, but just let me finish this point. It's that same idea from when you're on an airplane, when that stewardess is briefing the group and she talks about the mask. Make sure you're taking care of yourself so that you can keep on breathing, and then you can start taking care of other people around you, making sure they have their mask on too. Because if you're dying inside, you can't take care of that next person because you don't know how to do it. You got to know how to do something before you help somebody else know how to do something.
Yes, sir. So, and real quick, because that was a powerful statement that you just made. Sometimes that's literally a reframe right there, right? So all the negative things that I've gone through in my life felt like a type of death. And I had to go through those deaths, if you will, in order to help people, bring people to life. And I had to, in my own therapy and in my own work, that's how I was able to reframe my life experience and step into the role that I'm in right now. And it's very powerful, man, to be honest with you. When you look at your life or you look at situations that are dead and you realize, like, man, I had to experience that pain. I had to experience that turmoil in order for me to grow, but ultimately to bear fruit so others can eat of that tree and they can see that, wow, you know what? I can do that same thing and I can grow, man. It's very powerful because we learn by modeling. We learn by each other and by seeing each other do it. Like I am a horrible therapist if I haven't walked down the path that I'm trying to get other people to walk down.
Yes. Or have a very clear understanding on how to do it.
Yes.
So, I mean, do you have any closing comments before we wrap this up?
No, that was it.
That was it. Another great episode, man. So this was Warrior Leadership. Mental health and toxic leadership was the subject. This wraps up our evening. For those who are watching now, or for those who watch in the future, please like this, subscribe to the YouTube channel that you see this on, or subscribe to the podcast. But more important than anything else, if this information resonated with you, then please keep the conversation going by putting a comment below. And we appreciate you for watching. Hopefully you made it to the end and you're hearing me say this. But thank you again to our wonderful audience, and we will see you next week.